With that being said, let's learn about business alerts. Go ahead and take it away.
All right, thanks, Kim. I guess you can see my screen now.
Yes, I can.
Okay, so we've got just maybe 3 or 4 different slides here, and then we're going to spend the rest of the time looking at software. But business alerts really have been around a long time. I think Kim mentioned 2013. Business alerts have gone back in one form or another almost 15 years, maybe more, in Dynamics GP. And so they've evolved a little bit as the back end, kind of the SQL Server, has evolved. But alert processing, as we used to call it, has been around for a long, long time. And really, an easy way to think of a business alert or an alert is it's really a way to watch and monitor what's going on in GP. So basically, some activity to occur, whatever that might be, is up to us. And then when that activity has happened, the system alerts someone that it did. And we'll talk about what those alerts can be and how we can deliver those and so forth. And it's really that simple. It's just kind of a monitoring of the data in the database, and when some condition occurs, we want it to do something. And for the most part, an alert isn't necessarily smart enough. It's not workflow, so this is pre-workflow, and so it's not smart enough like workflow today to watch for a condition, and then when that condition exists, to then do something based on that condition. An alert, because it is so old, it really is just the first part of that. So when something happens, the alert can notify us, and then at that point the alert is out and says, you know, I'm done. That's all I can do is tell you, Mr. or Mrs. User, here's what's happened, and then it's up to us to actually take some kind of action or just look at it and say, oh, okay, nice to know. Okay, so some examples, and we could spend the rest of the day on examples, but simple things like maybe a customer goes on credit hold, or we've got a hold on their account for some reason. Doesn't have to be credit, I guess. GP Business Alerts can send the appropriate sales rep, based on the customer setup, a notification that hey, account executive, this particular customer has been placed on hold. And again, the alert's not going to do anything with that. It's just an alert. That's why it's called an alert. So it just tells us what's going on. Another example that's fairly common might be if an accounts payable invoice comes in and it's entered, and as most of you probably know, you can have payment priorities set up now on your vendors. That's been around for quite a few versions. And if an invoice goes in and that is attached to a vendor that has a high payment priority, GP Business Alerts can notify the correct person of this priority. That could be a payables clerk, so maybe someone else writes the check versus the person that actually enters the voucher or the transaction. And so we alert that person or that group that, hey, this invoice just got put in and posted in the system. This vendor has a very high payment priority, and so that way we don't miss. And why would we do that? Well, you know, sometimes you're trying to follow a contract, or make sure you get a certain discount, or you were given special pricing, but the condition is you have to pay this within 10 days, for example, or the price reverts back to retail, or something like that. So we're going to look at some other things that are already in the system, and then we'll kind of just build a simple one from scratch. But you kind of have to let your imagination run wild here a little bit on what you could do with alerts. And then lastly, how do the alerts alert? How do they notify? Generally 2 ways. One is email, and that's probably the most common way, and it does use the SQL mail service. It's part of SQL Server. The other way that could be equally as common, I guess, but is to alert another GP user. And so that's really only workable if we're alerting someone that has a GP login, but a lot of times we're alerting someone that is outside of the GP environment, and so we would use the email to send a notification and may send a report with the data along, and so we'll look at that. But GP users can be alerted. It does post a notification on their home page, and so it does allow you to see that when you log into GP, and that way you know that what's happening. So, okay, with that, we will close down the slides here, and then you should see my Dynamics GP. Give that just a second here to get up. Okay, so we're going to spend most of our time here kind of in the admin area because that's where the alerts are, and so if you use the newer area pages, you'll see under the admin tab, the system section, there's an option here called business alerts. If you're from the old navigation days, which I actually am, you can do the same thing. So we'd want to go to tools, setup, and system, and then business alerts down here just a little more than halfway, and so both of those will take us to the screen that we want to work on today. And of course this is password protected in most systems. And so here there's a wizard, and before we create one, we'll actually go in and look at the alerts that exist, and these are in the sample company. Of course, you can use these alerts in your live company very easily by just changing the company database that the alert is hooked to, and so you'll see over here that the alerts are assigned to a particular database, and so it's very simple to modify one and hook it to another database, thus copying it. But you'll see things in here already like cash balances, maybe when the checkbook balance gets below a certain amount, we want an alert to trigger off. And now if you think about it, we'll pause here, if you think about it, this actual feature of Dynamics GP is, in my opinion, and I'll stress my opinion, but it's really the most underutilized feature of the software. Hardly anyone uses alerts, and I think the poll that Kim did was great because we found that to be true with the audience today, that 100% of you that took the poll, and it sounded like everybody took it, had not used alerts. And so you might start to see in here, this seems like it might be a little outdated with today's dashboards and all the Excel reports or SQL reports we have. And yes, that you could make an argument that alert processing is from another generation. And it is. This has been here, as I said, this has been in the software, 15 years, as far back as I can remember, maybe 20. Well, back in the day, as we say, we didn't have SQL reports, we didn't have Excel refreshable reports, we didn't have dashboards, that was something in our car. We didn't have all this sizzle technology that we have today, and so we didn't really have a way to have the software be intelligent to tell us what's going on. Smart lists didn't exist. The smart list reminders that we can put on our home page, that stuff it hadn't been invented. And so, there are other ways to do what we're looking at right now, but this is still a very viable tool, and it does have some things that are kind of out of the box here that you might find use for. And so you kind of see if customer goes over their credit limit, we could have an alert fire off. They built a few things in here just to kind of show us what could be done. But of course we can have unlimited of our own. So let's look at this checkbook balances. And so you'll see here it's a wizard, so it's going to kind of walk us through, and it's hooked to my sample data, which is TWO, and of course I have my Dynamics or my system company, and those are the only two databases in my test environment. But if you had 50 companies, for example, you would see all your company databases there. So you can decide which one that you actually want to hook it to. And then, of course, the alert needs an ID. And here, maybe what we're going to do is say if the checkbook balances are below 500, you know, $100 isn't much for a business account. Actually, 500 is not either, but you'll kind of get the idea here. And so we're going to edit the actual alert that Microsoft built. And so this really is where the actual data is coming from. And so these are just kind of the different modules or the different components of the software. And this will look familiar if you've ever done anything in Report Writer or SmartList Builder or SmartList Designer or anything like that. These series will look familiar, and the posting setup in GP follows the same naming convention there for the series. And so what's already built is that we have pulled the cash management table 00100 called the checkbook master. And so and we see all the tables, and so if we were actually going to look for that, we'd go under financial because we know bank rec is in the financial part of Dynamics GP, and so then we'd scroll through the tables here and we see our accounting information, so our account master and so forth, because general ledger is part of financial as well, and so we can kind of scroll through and we get into the banking, and there's the checkbook master right there. And so we would insert that, which has already been done for us here because I'm editing an existing alert. And so then it comes to a little bit of an intimidating screen, but you should not be intimidated by this. All we're doing is finding now in that table, in the cash, the checkbook master, the CM00100, we're looking for the current balance. And you'll see that that's been abbreviated current BLNC. You know, we can't type those names out or the columns would be so large. If you think about Excel, a lot of times you abbreviate the column headings, and so that's really what's been done here. And so we're saying right now if it's less than 100, well, remember I want to change the alert to say if it's less than 500. Now I've got all kinds of operators here, and I could insert those. You know, if I want to click the plus, I could do that and insert it, or I could just go to the plus on my keyboard. Remember, this is a fairly mature part of the system, meaning that this has been in here for quite a while. And so back in the day, so to speak, a lot of times we used you know, symbols up here on the screen to actually execute keyboard commands, and so that's really just a carryover from that. If there's a key on the keyboard that has the same symbol, we can use that. And so you'll notice that I could have typed a 500 in as the constant, and then I could have added that. You'll see it did that. It added that for me. Of course, I don't need that, but I just typed over the 100 and made it a 5. So don't be intimidated by this window. It looks like there's a lot of stuff to do, but you'll see it's very, very simple here. And so then really this is the end of it, is what do we want the alert to do? Well, I've got this one set to go to a user ID, and the user ID that's going to get the alert is the system admin, the SA, because that's how I log in. And then the message that would go with the alert is freeform. I can do anything I want here. Of course, I want to change this and put the 500 down here, and I could add anything on there, but that's really just a simple kind of a one-liner that would go out to the, in this case, the user IDs. We're going to build one here next, and then we'll do set it up for an email, but again, we're just kind of editing what Microsoft has done. And so when we click next, then the very last thing is the schedule, is how often, the software is saying, is how often do you want me to look at your checkbook balance in this alert, and decide, do you need to know about it or not? Well, you know, I could have it done weekly, monthly. If I'm looking at cash balances, that's probably not very helpful. So I've got mine set to daily, and then I want it tested every day, and I want it tested every hour. And so that would start at 12 a.m. to 12 p.m. and start on February 1st. And so this alert is active. I could uncheck the enable down here. So if I was just kind of working on this, but I didn't have it quite the way I wanted it, I don't want it to kind of fire off. And so I might just uncheck it. Or if I want to disable one, maybe it's, I'm sending out too many alerts. I'm bothering people. And so they're getting notices too often. And so I could disable that for a little while and then come in and figure out what my new schedule might be. Okay, so, and I am keeping alert history, and again, that's optional as well. And then we finish, and that's it. And now we edited one, and so yeah, that was fairly quick. But let's go back, and we'll actually create a simple one here. And again, you kind of have to let your imagination. It's like a Smart List. If you use Smart List, or you use Smart List Builder or Smart List Designer, or any kind of reporting, Crystal reports or anything, sometimes you can just sit there and just daydream about all the different reports that you could create or smart lists that you could create. Well, you can do the same thing with alerts. What you don't want to do, though, is pepper people with alerts all day that they start to ignore them. And so, we have to be reasonable, of course. So I'm going to create a new one. And, of course, I'll get my, this time let's get our data out of the dynamics, out of the system database. And you'll see that it reminds me, hey, you're in the system database, and that's fine. Not all of you might have access to all of these. If you don't have access to a certain company, you would not be able to create an alert for that company. If you only log into one company and there's 10 you don't, well, you're not going to be able to log into or create alerts on the 10 that you don't type thing. And so we'll just do something simple and say users in GP. And so users logged in, and maybe how about we say after 5 p.m. And so we'll do something like that. And so the idea here that I'm thinking of is maybe we create an alert to run sometime after 5 p.m. every day, and we want to see, is there anybody still logged into the system after 5 p.m. So if that's our normal time, everybody should always be out of the office and out of the system by 5 p.m. Maybe if I look at it at 5:30 or 6 p.m., if I see people logged in there and I'm doing maintenance or want to do maintenance, then that's going to tell me that, hey, there might be something that I need to check into here. So could be somebody working late, could be somebody lazy and just didn't log out. Maybe they left early, they were sick, or they had a sick kid and they kind of rushed out of there quickly and forgot to log out, or whatever it might be, but you kind of get the idea there. Okay, so here, because I'm in the Dynamics database now, so I'm seeing only my system information. So if I try to find my user activity, and again, this is really, if there is a hard part to it, it's kind of knowing where the data is, just like any other report writing tool that you've used. If you've used the GP report writer, if you use SmartList or Builder, Extender, anything like that, Crystal, any of those report writers, the hardest thing for most people is knowing where to go to get the data, and that comes with a little bit of trial and error. It comes with asking for help. So that might be the GPUG group, the community. It might be us. It might be just going to look online. After a few years, maybe not that long, but you start to get the hang of kind of where data resides in GP, and you kind of figure out the naming conventions of the tables that are in the database, and so it becomes much easier. But the first time through, it can be a little challenging because there's so much stuff there. Sometimes just getting down to where that data resides is the time consumer. Okay, and of course I could have hit the U key if I thought this started with U for user and gotten right down here, but there's my user activity, and so I'm just going to insert that and say I want to look at that table in the system database, and so easy enough. Then next, and here's that intimidating screen, and so I've only got one table. Now, just as a side note, just like any report writing tool, we can hook tables together, so we could do joins on tables and then have those tables connected so that we can look at multiple tables as we're defining our alert. And so we don't have a lot of time to get too deep into it, but just know that that's available. This is not just a single table tool here. Okay, so once we select the table, then it's going to show us all the fields or all the columns in the table. And so let's just say user ID. And so now we've got the system going to look at the actual user IDs. And what we might do, now here you have to kind of let your, put a little logic to it and say, okay, so I want to look at the user table and I'm trying to see, are there any users in the user table? Because if everybody's logged out, then the user table should be empty. And so, but we can't describe it quite so high level to the system. We have to get a little basic with the software. And so we'll say is the user ID, and we want to see if there's anybody like SA right now. So SA would be in that user table. And so what I might want to do is do something creative and say maybe is the user ID, and I'll use the not equal to, and again I could have done some keyboard controls there just as easy, but so we'll say is the in the user activity table is the user ID not equal to, and I'm not sure what blank would be, so like null, if the user ID is nothing. But I know I would never actually have a user ID called ZZZ, for example, and I put that in quotes so the system doesn't think that's a real user. And so I'll say if the user ID is not equal to ZZZ, then I want to know about it, because I'm never going to have a user ID called ZZZ. Now, if I did, my little theory here is not going to work, but that'd be pretty unlikely. So, something kind of what looks to be crazy like that is actually very, very valid. And so, so that's good. If the user's not equal to ZZZ, then I want to know about it. Well, the user's never going to be equal to ZZZ, so that means if there's anything in this table, tell me. All right, so that should get us where we want to go. So now in this case, I'm going to do an email, and I'm going to do a message and a report. And so we'll have a chance here to design our own report as part of the alert. And so when I click on the two, this will look familiar, just kind of like Outlook here. When I click on two, and then I get kind of a basic Outlook screen. And let me see if I can find myself in all of the emails here. And if I say search, oh yes, okay, well, popular. Lots of options there for email. And so I'm just going to insert that. And of course, you've got the standard Outlook functionality here. And so I could add on as many users as I need. There's really no limit. And so the email is going to go to me. And then what do I want kind of the message text to actually have in there? And so these users are still in GP. And we'll say next. Now I can't test this, and the email's not actually going to fire off because I am on a demonstrating machine, and so we'll get a little error here because I actually don't have any mail. I don't have the ability to send mail out. And so, but what you should do if you're building this in your real environment is if you click test, you'll know that the mail part is working. And so that's always a good thing to do, because sometimes people build these and then they don't ever get a message, and I would say probably 99% of the time they don't get the message because they don't have the mail turned on. So we'll say next. Now normally it would finish, but remember I said I want the message and a report. And so when I click next, the system is taking me into the report kind of builder here and says, well, what do you want on the report? And so again, I've only got the user activity table, and then this kind of goes back to everything that was in that table. Well, what do you want to see? And so company would be good, because that will tell us that are receiving the alert, that'll tell us the company name a particular user is logged into. And so that's very helpful. And maybe their login date and maybe their login time. And sometimes people log in and then they stay logged in for days or more at a time. And so by this login date and time, we might see, oh, this person's logged in, but look, they've been in there for 2 weeks. So, that may or may not be a valid login for today. And so this would show me on the report the name of the company the person's in, the user ID, so the actual GP user, and then the date and time. And so, and you can rearrange these things by how you insert those. You notice it just kind of stacked them up there the way I clicked the insert button. And so it's not smart enough to kind of rearrange these once they're in there, but once you kind of play around with this a little bit, you figure out that, well, if I just click on the one that I want next and insert it, it'll put that in as the second column and third and fourth and so forth. And so you can easily decide kind of how you want this. And if you put something in there that you don't want, maybe I say I don't care about the time, that's getting down to splitting hairs. I just want to know the date that they logged in. Well, I'll just take that out. And so then next. And so now when you actually lay this out kind of on paper, so to speak, you don't have to have all of the parts being able to sort on the report. So here you kind of want to think about, well, how should the report sort? Well, if I sorted by user ID, I probably only got one user ID logged in at a time, although you could use the same user ID to log into multiple companies, but I might want the company name maybe would be a good way, so I can see by company who's actually in that company. And so we can, and remember, you can edit these as you go along, and even after you finish. And after they run for months, you can go back in, like we looked at the checkbook balance and we made an edit to that, to the dollar amount, so we can always change these up. And so when I next, and then you'll remember the schedule here. And so again, I'm going to have this run every day, and I'm going to have it run, well, I guess we could do once because we said after 5 o'clock. And so what I'm going to say is it's 1800. So and I could have done 6:00 p.m., but 1800 was maybe one keystroke less, so but it figured out that that was 6 p.m. and so even though I called my alert after 5, users logged in after 5, I'm going to give them the 5 to 6 to really kind of get cleaned up and get out of the office. And so by 6 o'clock, if there's somebody still logged in, I know there's no way possible anybody's going to be working after 6. And so that's like a safe time that I could have the alert run. And then when do I want to have the alert start? Well, because we just created it, it's going to assume today, but again, I might not want this to kick off until March 1st, for example. And so, we're not going to do this. We're going to give them a couple of weeks to kind of get their process down, and so you can post date these or predate them if you want. Of course, it won't go back. If I set this to 2/1 of 17, it's not going to go back for the first, almost 15 days. And look at that, obviously, it's still going to start with something current. And so if I wanted this to just run for a period of time, I could do that. I'm going to say there's no end date. And so unless I come in and kill this off or make it inactive by unchecking the enable box here, so I'm going to disable it, it's just going to run every day at 6 p.m. indefinitely. And we can keep the history here. And we could test this, but again, I'll get the error because I don't actually have the mail piece functional on this test box, but in your live environment, this is a very good thing to do, is test and just make sure that you don't get any error messages there. And then finish, and then that's it. And so that alert then would be in my list, and if I wanted to modify that for whatever reason, I've got users logged in after 5 right there, and there's my alert. And so again, just like we did with the cache piece, we could come in and make any edits to this that we want to, whether it's schedule or whatever it might be. And so very simple, and it's back in the bucket there. And so it's not difficult at all to create. It is using the wizard, and so Microsoft's very good about giving us wizards where they can. The only difficult thing is knowing maybe where that data resides. And so if you've ever taken any report writing, you might have learned a couple of tricks on where things are. So for example, if you went into the user security window, just grabbing anything here off the menu, and so we'll just grab my normal user there. And so some of you have probably seen that window before where we set up and kind of manage user security and access to any modified reports or screens that we've done. And so if I want to do an alert that uses data on this window, and just as an example, if I come up to Tools and Customize, well, let's do Integrate. And then if we go into Table Import, and you'll see Table Import is always going to be available on any window as long as you have security to it, and so you might have to have a higher level user doing this, SA or Dyn SA, or if you're a power user then you would have access as well. And so table import, now you might be thinking, what the heck, what's table import? That has nothing to do with what we're doing here, but table import from any window in GP, table import will open and it will show us all of the tables that are touched or hooked to this window. And so if you look at the fields that are on the window and the tables that are hooked to the window, you kind of start to see, oh yeah, company master, that's where the company name's coming from, and then of course all the user information down here, of course that's you know, what we're dealing with down here in the main part of the window. And so this allows us to see the actual tables that are attached to the window. And see, there's my user master, and so you know, and my user activity, where the alert we just did. And so Microsoft, over the years, Great Plains software, over the years, they have naming conventions, and these are kind of the English names. So what we would speak to the table is the user activity table. But when you actually go to the database where that table is, that's not the name of the table. The tables have an alphanumeric numbering system. And so what this does is help us see the English name of the table, and then we can go in and figure out what the database name of the table is. Now, why they did that, I'm sure there's really good reason. They might not do it that way today, but you know, 25 years ago when Dynamics was built and released, that's the way they did it. And so, and we still have that with us today. And so remember user activity. And so I'm just going to cancel out of this and close that. And then, and you can do this from any window as well, but if you go into Tools and Resource Descriptions, and then Tables, so Tools, Resource Descriptions, and Tables, this will actually show us the link between the common English name, the display name of the table, and the actual database name of that same table. And so here, if I go into the system, and so we see now the display name here are listed in alphabetical order. And so if I scroll down here to the use, and so now we see things that start with user, and there's user activity. And so that's the table that we used in our alert, but if I were actually to go to the database, that table is actually named activity, and that's one of the few exceptions that the table actually has an all alpha name, and it's somewhat descriptive, but you'll see the physical names of some of these tables don't make a lot of sense. So SY is for system. We're in the system, so the tables are named SY, and then they just have a number. Well, that means absolutely nothing to most of us. It's just the way that the system was built, and they just started sequentially numbering these tables. And so, you know, if we were looking for user security, well, you'll see in the database that is the SY 10,000. And so there is an easy way to figure out kind of where data is, and that's typically how I would do it, is start with a window and open that table import. That will show us the tables that are hooked, and then I go to the resource descriptions, and then through a little trial and error, I can figure out where the data is. Now what I should have done is go back in here. I closed that a little too soon, and so we're going to go back into the system, and we'll go back down to our user. And so here's user activity. So that's the actual table, but what I wanted to do is double click on that for you, and when I do that, you'll see that the system opens up, and it kind of opens the fields, the columns, so to speak, that are in that table. And so here I see all of the different elements of that table. So think of a table as a file, and all the different fields. So if you think about an Excel spreadsheet as the table, and then all the columns or all the things that, all the rows that you put in your Excel file, that's what I'm looking at here. And so if I wanted to know what the user ID was called, well, oddly enough, it's called user ID. But remember, we pulled in the login date and time, and I think I took the time out, and we pulled in the company. And so we were actually able to see the fields easy enough to figure out what they were. But sometimes you don't see exactly something that's that descriptive, and so sometimes you want to look and see, well, what's that called in the table? Maybe I can kind of figure that out. And so this one's a fairly simple one because there's not much in it, and what's in there is pretty well defined. But if you're looking at sales transactions or receivables transactions, payables, purchasing transactions, stuff where there's lots and lots of different data elements, there's lots of things on the screen, on the window, you'll see lots of things in the table. And so this is an easier way to figure out exactly what you have in there. And of course you can print this off if you wanted to, a list of that, so that you could have that beside you while you were kind of working on a smart list, or in this case a business alert, or a smart list builder report, or something of that effect. You can always put that onto paper. And so so with that is kind of just to summarize, business alerts is very, very underutilized. It's been there a good long time, but most people that have Dynamics GP, even people that have had it for 20 years, have never, ever, ever created a business alert or used a business alert. And you could go in very, very quickly, and if you want to just see how this works, all you have to do is go in and modify one that's there and just hook it to your company. So, oops. And so if I said, hey, I want to do this credit limit one, and I'm going to edit it, and I'm going to just change that from the sample company, which yours would look like TWO, just like mine, and your company, your live company, would be in the list. Just pick your live company, and next, next, next through it. You don't have to change anything else because your data looks just like the sample data. And so the tables and the columns and all that are exactly the same. And just when you get up to the notification, decide if you're going to send that back to a user. You could send it back to yourself, or you could send it out in an email. And if you're doing a report, you don't have to make any edits here at all. You can use whatever Microsoft has done and check your schedule to see how often you want it to run, and then you can kind of let it go and forget about it. And as long as your SQL mail is working, it will run, should run. And so that's a very quick way in just a few seconds to actually test out these alerts, is just flip the to company to your live and let a few of them go and see if you like them. Just a note on the SQL mail, that's something that your SQL administrative person or your IT group or company should be able to check. And if you want to start using either the out-of-the-box alerts, or you want to create your own, or both, you might just ping your IT group and just ask them if the SQL mail is running, and they'll probably ask you why and who told you to ask, because they're going to know that someone told you to check for SQL mail, and just tell them that there's some SQL alerts that are built into the ERP system, and you want to be able to have those work, and they rely on the SQL mail. and they should be able to turn that on for you. If they need help, they can contact us, or just kind of peck around on the internet a little bit, or in the Dynamics community. There's lots and lots of stuff on there. It's a little different based on the version of SQL you're on. So some of the older versions of SQL had an older version of mail system. The newer versions are a little easier, and they don't rely on mail profiles and stuff like that. And so, but your DBA or your IT group, they should be pretty comfortable with testing that SQL mail to make sure it's up and running, or they can turn it on. It's very, very simple to do. And so, but again, if they get stuck, have them check with us. We can easily help them. So Kim, I think that's really what I wanted to make sure that we looked at. I don't know if you have any questions out there, or any thing that people are curious about. And Kim, it
Oops,
looks
I was
like you're...
muted. All right. So type them into the right-hand side under the question area, and let's get these answered by Brian. There's nothing in the queue. And so, I guess, Brian, one thing, a lot of people just plain aren't aware. What I find with users, a lot of times they simply upgrade to the next version of GP, but they really don't dig in and take advantage of some of the feature sets. And so do you have any cool success stories on any clients that have taken advantage of this, and what did they learn from it?
Yeah, there's all kinds of things that come up when you start kind of spending a little bit of extra time with the software. We had a client years ago down in Houston that was a large pipe manufacturing distribution company, and they had all kinds of problems with customers. They didn't have a good credit policy. They had all kinds of problems with customers and placing orders, and they hadn't paid, and the receivables were kind of out of whack. And it wasn't really the fault of Dynamics GP. It's just they didn't have a good process internally. Payments would be stacked up on someone's desk and not put into the system only when she had time, and that might be every couple of days, that might be every couple of weeks. And so people would call, they'd call to place an order, and the sales guys would look at it and say, hey, you're sorry, you owe us money. Well, the customer would get pretty excited, because they'd say, hey, I paid that 2 weeks ago. Well, what'd you do with my money? So they'd have to go to the finance person, and she's digging on somebody's desk. Oh yeah, here's a check, and go ahead. And so really not a good setup. And so I was up there one time helping them with something else, and I said, hey, you've got these alerts, and this is before dashboards, before smart lists. None of that stuff was invented yet. So this is, probably 10, 12 years ago. And so, I said, hey, why don't we just turn some of these on? We didn't even take the time or trouble to create a new one. All we did was go in, and we took this credit limit, we took the customers on hold, we turned those on against their company. And about a week later, the CFO called, and he said, this credit limit thing, and we had it set to go every day, either in the morning or in the afternoon, I don't remember which, but once a day. And he got the email, he got the report, and it's just a simple report. This is not going to be a flashy report that you're going to hang on the wall because it looks so good. No, nothing like that. It's really just raw data, and so it's a very basic report. But he said, this thing has saved me so much time and energy and trouble, and he said, I look forward to getting it every day, because I can see now what's going on instead of going and asking 6 people in the organization. And he said, I found out our data is a mess, and it gave me the ability to go in and say, hey, this guy's on the report. I know that we don't have a credit problem there, so what's going on? Oh yeah, we just haven't posted his payment, and so anyway, just something simple, but he was actually able to use that to completely revamp his whole process around invoicing and payment processing, and getting that stuff in the system. And he was so happy with that simple little thing. And again, that was quite a few years ago. We didn't have a whole lot in the cool stuff we have today, but Kim, it can be the same today. It doesn't have to be credit limit. It can be anything. That the idea is that we want the software to make life easier. We don't want it to cause more work, and we don't want it to just kind of allow us or force us to keep doing the same thing we've always done. That's not the purpose of the software. The purpose of the product, especially this product, is to make life easier, to reduce the time that we waste to get data to our fingertips in seconds and in one mouse click instead of 3 or 4 or 5 or digging through things. And we want the software to be more proactive. And so, most of you, if you're on current versions, you've got your reminder area up here. This is very, very similar to the business alert functionality. The nice thing is the business alert can actually go out to anyone through email. What I'm looking at on my reminders is good if I'm a GP user and I log in and I see my home page. But if I'm not, this doesn't help me much. So there's so many different ways that we can get the software to be smarter and tell us what's going on instead of us having to go digging through reports and screens and windows to try to figure out what's going on. So more than you bargained for there, Kim, I'm sure. But
no, good to hear stories. And I didn't realize, to be honest, I didn't realize that this has been around that long.
It has. Nobody uses it. I mean,
Yeah.
Microsoft, Great Plains wrote this. This was before Microsoft. So this is Great Plains stuff that they added.
I'll be darned. Very cool. And I had one Microsoft MVP talked about it a lot. And so I think that he's got a lot of success stories. So we got to really take a look at this. Thank you. All right, everybody. So if you're ready to get started and you want some help, reach out to Brian and or our team, and we'll help you out in doing it. You can see how helpful it's going to be. And I hope you learned something new today. So thank you, Brian, and thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.